Welcome to IRO Live with host Bob Bay.
We started looking at the book of Exodus. When you look at it, and we began talking about it, God gives us a road path, a map to the way our life is going to be, the transformation. And he sets out milestones for us in our lives that we must cross. We must walk through these different things. And sometimes some people will go this way and then zigzag back and then this way. And then other people start out and they go straight for a long time, but then they zigzag here. You won't necessarily cover all of these parts in the exact order, but you must cover these parts. But the first one was the part where God led the children of Israel, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And if you want to read the story about how the Israelites got into Egypt, you can go back to Genesis 37. There's also some in there in Exodus and Deuteronomy. Obviously, in Exodus, it's about the Exodus. You can go back and you can read that, how they ended up there, what ended up happening, and why they ended up having to leave. A lot of people know the story from, if you're as old as I am, you remember Charlton Heston and the Ten Commandments. I love that movie. A lot of people have an overview like that, and they remember that. And that is what we're talking about. There's so many things that it parallels that God gives us to learn from in our walk today. We talked 2 weeks ago about the thing of Egypt being a foreshadowing or a type of what we would call this world. Moses came and delivered the children of Israel. He was an example of the Savior to come. And he led the people out of Egypt. And that kind of gives us an example of our freedom, us being saved from the world, okay? And so they left Egypt, saved, but God brought them to the edge of the Red Sea. And in the Old Testament, and actually a lot of ancient literature, the sea represents chaos or the unknown. And so whenever you see the sea, and that's why, there's monsters that live in the sea, right? You could fall off the edge of the earth if you go too far. It's an example of the unknown or chaos. The Bible uses that a lot when it uses the ocean or the sea. It uses that a lot as that kind of language to give you that feel of what's going on. There are a lot of stories that evolve around that. But so they're brought to the edge of the Red Sea. To go forward means to step into the unknown, what appears to be chaos from what they can see. But behind them is Egypt. And that, remember, they complained and they're like, why'd you bring us out here to die? We're trapped here. But God had a plan. And he said, just move forward. They had to move forward for the Red Sea to part. It wasn't going to part and then them move forward. They had to take that step. But it was just one step. It was a long journey across. It's like 13 miles across this part that they believe was the Red Sea crossing. So it was a long journey, but it all started with one step. And that was the step of faith that said, I'm going to go forward. Even though it looks like chaos, even though I don't know what's going to happen. Once they made that decision, the soldiers came out to pursue them from Egypt to take them back to death and slavery. How many of you guys have been in a situation when you leave the old stuff behind? You can feel them on your heels, right? They're coming for you to try and drag you back. We just need to take that step forward. And once we do that, we reach a place where there is no going back. Once we get across the Red Sea, once we have that point and we've made that decision, there is no going back. Now, does that mean everything's going to be wonderful? Absolutely not. Does it mean there's going to be battles ahead? Absolutely. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to move forward to Exodus 15 in verse 22. As you start reading in chapter 15 in Exodus, 14 is where the crossing happens. Chapter 15 The first part of it is Moses. He's getting his praise on. He's like, God is so awesome, and he took care of all this stuff. And then Miriam is like, woo, he is so cool. And the Egyptians thought they were going to drag us back, but God took care of them. And so it's really awesome. Moses keeps leading them, and they travel for 3 days. And then they come to water finally. It's been 3 days. They haven't had water, except for what they had with them. But 3 days, and they come to water, and this is what it says. So Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. And they went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. And when they came to Marah, they could not drink of the waters of Marah, for they were bitter. Therefore, the name of it was called Marah. And the people murmured against Moses, saying, what shall we drink? And he cried unto the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree, which when he cast it into the waters were made sweet. Stop and let's think about this for a minute. It seems just like part of the story, right? But it was 3 days traveling without water, and then they came to water. Waters were poisoned. God showed Moses a tree. When the tree was thrown into the waters, it was made sweet. This is the next milestone, and it is thirst. We all must come to a point of thirst. And actually, we're all in a point of thirst. Once we leave, and actually a lot of times what keeps us held in Egypt, in the past, in the things, is thirst. And so what do I mean by that? What is thirst? Thirst is that deep craving on the inside that can't be quenched, can't be satisfied. Now for me, in the beginning, that thirst was meth, all of that kind of thing. I just had that craving. It would chase me. It would keep me awake at night. You know what I'm saying? If you've been there, you've been there, and you know. But then it moves on, and it's other things. Remember we talked in the beginning about these needs that we have, that each of us had, that are God-given needs for us. The need for significance. Have you guys ever been in a place where you just felt like you were insignificant, and you just felt like if you just mattered, you just wished that you could just matter to somebody, that your life mattered in this world? And when you have that unquenchable feeling like you don't matter and like people don't care, it creates in you a thirst. And you will try all kinds of things in relationships. It turns into codependency, it turns into people-pleasing, approval-seeking, all of these other things to try and quench that thirst. The tree represents the cross that would come. God showed Moses this tree, threw it in the waters. The water became sweet. Later on, we read prophecies that say, cursed is any man who hangs from a tree. Jesus became accursed for us. He died on the cross. That this represents that coming of the cross. And so how do we know that? How do we know that this all parallels together? Well, John 4:10-14. Now, it depends on which version you had. There's going to say a little bit different things, but it's all the same thing. For those of you who don't know, Jesus has just come up to the woman at the well. She is a Samaritan. And Jews, which Jesus was a Jew, Jews did not speak to Samaritans because Samaritans were considered unclean. But Jesus stops and he talks to this woman. And he asked her to get him something to drink, to draw some water for him, which would never have happened. And so she's kind of freaked out. She's like, what are you doing here? You're a Jew. And the woman of Samaria said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. And Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would give you living waters. The woman said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob?" Remember Jacob? Are you greater than our father Jacob? That's another lesson about the splitting of the 12 tribes. Anyway, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? And Jesus answered and said to her, "Whoever drinks of this water will thirst again, but whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life." See the parallels there? Now going back to the thirst. What does this mean for us? What is this milestone? You notice that the children of Israel got to this point and they're thirsty and they complain to Moses again. Just like we always do. We go through stuff and we complain about it. God, why are you letting this happen? God, why did you do this and all this? And God's like, it's okay, I got it. I'm going to take care of it. We all have to come to the point in our thirst to go to Jesus. And you say, well, but yeah, what does that mean? You know, what does that mean for me? I don't understand. So I'm thirsty. So I have all of this stuff going on inside me, this unquenchable stuff going on inside of me. What do I do with that? Well, it goes back to what we began in the beginning. It goes back to where we said in the beginning of working through those steps, working through that process of letting God come in and be God in your life. But that's not easy. Just like Don talked about before we started, it's not easy to just automatically be able to do that. But we have to come to that milestone, to that point where we surrender to Him and allow Him to quench that thirst. So if you keep reading in Exodus chapter 15, this is the second half of 25 where we left off. And he says, there he made for them a statute and an ordinance, and there he proved them. When it says he proved them, it means he tested them to show them what was going on. Basically what it's saying is if you'll listen to the voice of God and do what's right in his sight, and you listen to his commandments and keep his statutes, he'll put none of these diseases upon thee which he brought to the Egyptians. So let me say this in plain English. If you listen, remember we talked about following God, and when he says go left, right. And when you make a mistake, because you're gonna, and you go left, and he says, no, Bob, you're supposed to go right. Oh, okay. Yeah, you're right. I messed up. I'm going to go back right. Because we do, right? If we'll do that, if we'll follow it, what this is saying is as he tests them, it's a boundary, not with a consequence of something bad happening, but it's a promise with reward. And so he says, if you do this, then listen, this is what I'm going to do for you. We come to the point where we recognize the things that cause us to thirst in our life. Those things, unmet needs in our lives that cause us to want to run back to Egypt, to run back to the old things, to run back to doing things the way we've always done them. We want to identify those things. And we want to talk to God, and we want to the best of our ability, start each day new, to be conformed to the world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds and to walk in that, because there are promises that come with that. The next milestone is hunger. It starts out now, we have to identify thirst, and God gave them water. And so, for those of you who know the story, when the children of Israel were hungry in the wilderness, what did he give them? Manna. So we're going to talk about that next week, that hunger is an emptiness on the inside. Whenever they speak about being hungry, Whenever the Bible talks about, when you get to the New Testament, Jesus talks about hunger and thirsting a lot. When we hunger, there's an emptiness on the inside. Thirsting is a craving, unquenched desire. Hunger is an emptiness. Those needs are met very similarly, but they're different, and so we have to be able to recognize that.
Thanks for listening. Please comment and subscribe for upcoming podcasts. To order your copy of My Real Life, go to the Take Action page at our website, reallifeministries-stl.com, or go to Real Life Ministries STL on Facebook.